Recording is on.
Hello. So I let you introduce it, you.
Okay, so this is the Extinctionati meeting number 80, and it's October the 17th. So what should we do? So I wanted to go over some of the AI stuff that we were talking about in the Western meeting last time, but since Ryan is on this meeting, I'd like to go over that. And Gary's got a couple of points about writing, reading and writing. So I think we can weave both of them together because they are related. So let me start with those things and just say something about the previous thing about AI. So just to recap where we got to with the AI last time, I made a point that Rand seemed to think was just armchair philosophizing about what is intelligence. But I think it's very important in terms of deciding, what AI is as a threat and things like that, what its future is you have to decide what it actually is. And so I think the way to do that is by deciding what intelligence is, and is it intelligent? And so my view is it's not intelligence, it's borrowing from human intelligence. And so it's a very profitable line to pursue what intelligence is. So in my view, AI is an extension of the alien cortex. And so it's not a thing in itself. So, if you categorize it as something like, well, it's something that pursues a goal in a given context. Well, a lot of things could be said to do that. You could say, like a ball thrown up in the air has a goal of reaching the earth in the context of being thrown up and coming down again. But I don't think anybody would call a ball thrown up in the air intelligent. It's just following the laws of gravity. So I don't think you can make an abstract kind of definition of what AI is. You have to say humans are intelligent, and artificial intelligence was designed to mimic humans and exceed them. And so you say, well, what part of humans? Well, it's a very definite part, and it's the alien cortex. So it's kind of the alien cortex's brainchild. And so pursuing the question of what is an intelligence, and is the alien cortex itself intelligent, I think is the way to answer all the questions about what the particular dangers are of AI and things like that. So that's what I'm going to propose, is that we take it from that angle and then start with Gary's questions too. So Ryan, you got something to say?
Yeah. So I think a nice place to start is to kind of dismiss some common viewpoints on artificial intelligence, to say what artificial intelligence is not, or what the threats from AI are not. Because I think Hollywood and just popular culture kind of leads us astray a lot. So first off, I think that there's this kind of Star Trek distinction of artificial intelligence, like if you tell some robot that some kind of metaphor or some kind of infinite loop thing, then it's just gonna fry itself and get confused, and or if there's some kind of just quick question, can you hear too much background noise? Is this it's okay? All right.
It's okay. It's okay for me. Yeah.
Perfect. So I think that there are for a long time, a lot of the algorithms that were popular in artificial intelligence were very specifically alien cortex-like. So some of the theorem proving type of, prologue style AI, where you're just doing logical inference, or a lot of those algorithms are very, very specific, just trying to encode solutions, encode logic in a computer with the, decision, encoding your decisions, and that's essentially just copying human reasoning to some approximation, and knowledge, embedding it into a computer, which is just totally not AI, not impressive at all in terms of its ability to be creative or explore a problem space that in some novel way. So that's one thing. I think we something I shared in the group before was the DALL-E creativity thing, where you type some text, and then the computer invents an artwork that you described, right? So this is an example of something that's really not that doesn't seem very alien cortex-y to me, in terms of the kinds of intelligence that are typically thought of, like Vulcan reasoning type of thing. And then so that's one misconception. I'm not sure I captured exactly all of the color around that, but we can start with that. And then there is another misconception, and that's that when we're talking about threats from AI, that the threat is Terminator, that robots are going to take over, and that's just not a problem. I mean, it could be a problem with autonomous weapons and this kind of thing, but it is so much more expensive to build a reliable robot that doesn't just break, and like a robot that could repair itself and heal and produce, be a von Neumann constructor that can make copies of itself and stuff like that. It's such an intractable problem that it's not a threat. The threat is just server-side software, like the things that observe us and can make decisions in our legal system or in our the ecosystem that we have. So I'd say like things like thinking around Excel and the data that we collect and things like that. That's more of a risk than robot overlords uprising. So the threats that I mentioned in the last video, I think, are far scarier than anything Hollywood has thrown at us, because Hollywood doesn't tend to describe the problem as, if you have an objective function, if you have a goal-seeking behavior, that there are thousands of ways that goes wrong, and you can't enumerate them all. So if our AI listens to us and it's halfway competent, then we're in danger. So that's the bigger issue. So those are two kind of clarifying points, I think, that we can that can put some boundaries around the conversation that will help us break free of the common misconceptions about AI.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. So I totally agree with you, and like I think that is we must dismiss all those popular things that Elon Musk is talking about, that we must become augmented humans and then start having implants and things, silicon implants, and because otherwise we're going to become pets of AI. That is the Hollywood version, is the 12-year-old's version of what AI is. But AI as a systemic kind of threat is, yeah, I agree that's the longer problem, or the deeper problem. There's a couple of things, though, to highlight, and that's that we're heading into, I think we're at the end of the road pretty much in terms of tech in general, because, well, we're in the end game for tech because of all the other things that are catching up with us. Like, you can see the collapse happening. And so the systemic kind of AI that's in server farms and in the cloud and doing big data number crunching is it doesn't have much longer to go. I mean, it's got a long way to go, you know, in terms of surveillance in the end times kind of thing. But in terms of, you know, is it a risk to civilization? Civilization is already collapsing. So it's going to be a victim of it before some of the long-term scenarios can come about. In other words, we have this tech dystopia where we all serve the machine. So we all already serve the machine from the beginning. I think that it was a case of us serving the machine, and it was always sold as the machine will serve man. But if you go back, I think that one of the first and key problems with machinery and AI in general is that they very quickly become our master. In other words, you can see it in all sorts of levels. You can see people go out and buy a car thinking, well, that will give me freedom and autonomy. But pretty soon they're running a job and to pay more, you know, to pay the car payments, and the car is really ruling them. They're sitting in you know, you can see them now sitting in lines at the gas station in the UK to try and get energy, and you can see like who's serving who. I think you serving that car. The car's the master. It's not you. So that is the danger all the way back, and I would like to kind of highlight how far back it goes, because if you ask people when the idea of a machine came about, I think they generally say, well, an industrial revolution, 1750, maybe the steam engine. Then a few people would say, well, it goes back further, that Heron had a turbine, and there's the Antikythera mechanism that maybe Archimedes made. But it actually goes back to a mindset, and I think that's important. It goes back about at least 10,000 years. And the evidence for that is, yeah.
I just wanted to intersperse something, if I can, briefly. You've got the origins of the machine in like the 5 basic elements, like the wedge, the lever, the wheel. Can't think what the other 2 are now, but there's got like the 5 fundamental principles that underlie every mechanical machine, at least, which predate the actual creation of complex, machines that are made up of a compound of the basic elements. But they're already there in levers and wedges and wheels and axles and just the basic elements that human beings were using for a long time were the seeds from which all the rest of it.
I agree. Those have been around for a long time, but I would take it back even further. So because I like what Hugh is saying about a mindset. And I think it's machines can kind of are somewhat parasitic on the ability to do kind of abstract reasoning. And there's Huizinga coins the term for Homo sapiens as Homo ludens, the playing man, and I think there's some truth to that. In a system of abstract rules, they're like board games from 5,000-6,000 years ago that are still viable games, and that's a very clear alien cortex activity where you are you have these laws of abstract game rules that create a virtual world in a sense that you can manipulate, and I think that's part of the origin story, I think, in terms of how you create machines, how you create this what Darren Allen would call the system.
Well, yeah. So yeah, where I was going with that was the evidence for machines is very specific. So it goes. The first evidence is a yantra. So a yantra is the Sanskrit word for machines, and it means literally gadget, mechanism, and it's the yantra is 10,000 years old. So they in the Indus Valley, they have the concept of the yantra and the machine. Now it's important because those guys are Indo-Iranian, if you want to be clever and try and avoid the word Aryan, or otherwise Proto-Indo-European, if you want to be politically correct and try and pretend the Nazis didn't exist. But they really Aryans. They call themselves Aryans, and it's an Aryan thing. So the idea of a machine is an Aryan thing, and you got to say, well, and it's older than 10,000 years. So you got to situate it round about Göbekli Tepe. And so you have to say, okay, so if it is a frame of mind, what is it? Well, it's two things. And I think you can clearly see, although it's not a popular theory by any means, there's evidence for it in the genes, and just my theory that it kicks off with the hybridization of Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. And you can see what's happened, or at least I think I can, because the Cro-Magnons are goal-oriented. They're hunters. So what Gary was saying about reading and writing, he said, your first question, Gary, you say, if you don't actually write things down, is how do you keep track of things? Now, the key word there is track. So the idea of tracking something comes from spoor and the hunt. It's the idea of tracking down a goal. So you essentially, hunters and African hunters were hunters to exhaustion. So they needed a tremendous concentration on a goal, and I mean for days. They would either remember a kill. So in other words, like the San Bushman, they have fletchers. So the arrows are poisoned, and they fletch the animal so that it will die in about a day. So they have to, get close enough to the animal, just graze it with the poison, and then they have to come the next day to pick it up. And so to do that, they have to be expert trackers and keep track of spoor. And that spoor really becomes writing. You can see there's a lot of evidence for the glyphs and things that appear on rocks. They are definitely hunters. They are reading the ground. I'm very conscious of, like, I think Leakey or somebody like that, or the guy from Born Free, who lived with all the lions and that with his wife. And he said he never read newspapers. He said his newspaper was the mud, because he would go and go down to the river in the morning, and he could see in the mud that, oh, a lion has appeared in the vicinity, and you can see how many impala went through, and everything was written in the dust and the dirt. And that is how it is for Africans, not for Neanderthals, right? Tracking is not really possible in peat bogs of Europe. So you have to see this mindset of these very, very goal-oriented, and to the point where they evolve, it becomes part of their genes. So the reason why Kenyans won the Olympics in terms of running marathons is purely because they have thin ankles. That's all it takes. You need to be long and skinny. And in one particular region in Kenya, they have thin ankles, and they hunt us to exhaustion. They basically run after deer for days, a couple of days, 3 days even. So that's the genesis of that hunter mindset, all the way down to the genes. I raised the thing about ankles because it means we've been doing that kind of hunting for so long, it's got into our ankles. Now, it's very interesting that the word spoor is the same word for spur. And it means, it's Proto-Indo-European meaning ankle. So when you say tracking, how do you keep track without writing? It's a very, very San Bushman hunter thing you're saying. You're saying, how do I pursue my prey without, tracking the spoor? In other words, with writing, reading the ground, which is what they do. The trackers are reading the spoor, like writing, literally in a line, like writing. So you have to say, so the very first answer to your question, Gary, about how do you keep track, is why do you want to keep track? You are thinking in terms of saying something I say or something that comes up as as being something to gain. So you think it's a goal, I must catch it, I must capture it, and I must keep track of it. So it's a very pursuit-minded thing. And that's not what I'm saying. Is all the things I'm saying, you're better off not writing them down. So in the cult I was in, there were, everybody would come for the first year and they were trained, from university and stuff to write notes. Take notes, children. And everybody would take notes. But they would tell you, once you got into it a bit, they'd tell you not to take notes. Because the thing is that they're trying to communicate something in context. So this is the very first danger, and this is the first danger of AI, is if you write things down, you're taking them out of context. So there's no way you can, put them back in the context again later. Or if you do, it's in your imagination. Right? So in other words, you're not actually going off what was said at the time. In the context of the time, you are actually probably not concentrating while you're writing, and you'll probably make up a fiction around your notes when you go back to them. So the very idea of trying to capture an idea, gain from it, like a hunter, is part of the danger of AI and that goal. And the reason is it's out of time. It's out of time and place. So it's kind of like, we're talking about like batteries and why the Piraha don't have fridges. It's because it's dangerous. In a chaotic environment, in a Kairos environment like what the Piraha live in, if they had fridges, if they stored their food, so they fish and get birds, but in a jungle environment, they would be overrun by vermin and things, and you'd get very sick if you ate a fish that's been hanging in the jungle for too many days. So it's lethal for them to store stuff. Now, in terms of food, it's the same for us, for brain food. We live in a chaotic environment, and what people are continually doing is going back to what, somebody said and some big quote or something Karl Marx said. Well, Karl Marx, when he wrote Das Kapital, was talking about very specific time, very specific context. And the same with the Bible. It was done for hunter-gatherers as basically, literally the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And now people pull it forward into the urban setting in New York. And you say, like, for fuck's sake, man, leave that thing back where it was. It's like, when hunter-gatherers told each other how the galaxy worked around the campfire, that, it's much better that those words die in context. Campfire. So in other words, like James C. Scott was talking about the Zomia people. The Zomia people had reading and writing. They gave it up because they moved into the highlands and became anarchists. And it's very beneficial. James C. Scott talks about the benefit of not having that kind of memory. So you don't want a rigid memory. You want a pliable memory. You want people and the society in general to morph their history according to their current situation. So it's unintelligent to have things cast in stone. So we think in terms, again, this hunter capture thing like this, is we think we got to get the facts straight. We got to get the history right. And we argue about the point of history because everybody knows that, history is power. That if you can control the historical narrative, like look at Israel, look at the Zionists. They you must remember. Why? Because it gives the Zionist power today. It's like the Holocaust is long gone, right? So why do you want to remember it? Oh, so it doesn't happen again. Bullshit. You want to remember the Holocaust because you want to keep on guilting people because you want power. So whoever controls the past controls the future, just like it said in 1984. Whoever controls the past controls the present, and whoever controls the present controls the future. So it's all about control. Writing is always about control, authority. So the reason why you want to write is you want authority over what, remembering what, say, happened in a previous meeting. That's why you write notes. So you can get command and authority and control like a hunter-gatherer. You can actually pursue a goal. Now that's not something you want. You want it to be. You want the past to be plastic, and so the past serves the present. So in other words, if you don't write down about the Holocaust and you don't chisel it into stone and you make memorials and stuff like that, how the Holocaust is, what it was, and how it's remembered will change over time. That's a good thing. That'll help you avoid the Holocaust again. Now that's not easy to understand, but it is in a simple way. Is I say, like, the Holocaust is being repeated right now in Israel today against the Palestinians, and it's reinforced by the memory of the Holocaust. If it would be far better for both parties if they started to get fuzzy about the memory of the Holocaust, if it started to be plastic and it started to be malleable, just like the human brain. And you can see that that's why the human brain is plastic. It's done so that you don't get stuck in traumas. You don't get stuck in the past. There's loads of stuff about in psychology that says the guys who went through the Holocaust that did best later were the guys that were able to forget it. The guys that were traumatized, broken, who perpetuated it, that did traumatic reenactment, was the guys who kept on remembering it, woke up every morning in a concentration camp. It's like, you're not in a concentration camp anymore, move on. But look at Israel. Israel is saying, we're still in the Holocaust. We still have this hanging over. They are, you know, the war in Iraq was fought for Israel, right? So it's like they are making and perpetrating all this evil and this stuff. They are doing traumatic reenactment because they cannot get over the Holocaust. It's like, move the fuck on. So why can't we move on? Because of the writing, you see. The alien cortex wants power, control, right? Writing's evil. It's fucking evil. So now this is important in terms of AI, because AI, when it started from machines. So machines had, you know, levers and valves and things like that. But what happened after the Jacquard loom was that the machines were instructed in the native language of the alien cortex. That's linear instructions. So it's you know, punch cards initially, but those punch cards just eventually became what you see that what DALL-E is doing is RPT3, and RPT3 is just a text to machine in
GPT-3
expression. So what is it?
GPT-3.
GPT-3. I thought it was RPT3. What does it stand for? GPT.
I'm not sure what it stands for.
It's what is it? Deep. I'm not sure, but anyway, if DPT3 is this, it's the most advanced for it's got quite a lot of uses now. But I mean, the DALL-E one was text to image. So it's yeah. If you talk to, I think if you talk to a lot of automated assistants, and you know, if you have help desk and a lot of these things where if you go on a website, it says it looks like a human assistant, so it pops up and says, hey, it looks like you're having trouble logging into your bank account. Can I help you with that? That's you know, probably GPT-3. So it's got very good at mimicking humans in the kind of Turing test way, is that, you know, through a teletype interface or a text interface. So yeah. So anyway, the thing is that text analysis was done first with the Jacquard loom. So you see the first computers and the Hollerith cards and things like that. Now it's well worth remembering, now that we're talking about the Holocaust, is it's unlikely they could have done the Holocaust without the administration behind it, which was done with IBM machines and Hollerith cards. So that is well worth remembering, that the Holocaust is closely tied to the Jacquard loom. And, you know, what they were doing with those holograph cards, they're basically punch cards on cardboard, but they're classifying people. So they are taking people and reducing them to a set of metrics. So in other words, one of the metrics would be sex, male or female, and then basically national origin and heritage. So then you'd be Jewish or Polish or and that's how they categorize you, so that you wind up in a set that this one's a worker, this one goes to the gas chamber. So that's how it's done. And then this is the danger of AI, and I'll let Ryan talk, but I think this is where we get into is this instant classification. So that say in China now, the AI is working at the level of, say, a pedestrian crosswalk in a road, and it can look at your behavior. It can say, okay, this guy is, before they've even jaywalked, they can say, oh, this guy's about to jaywalk, and do a pretty good job. But it can analyze your behavior and then identify you with facial recognition or even gait recognition, just how you walk. It can identify, do biometric identification of you, and then fine you for, and so that level of control comes by merely seeing people as as machines, and that's where we got to. If you didn't see the Adam Curtis thing, I really recommend looking at that. But I think Adam Curtis is right, and that's it. We got to this through the cyberneticists. So the danger with AI is cybernetics, and the idea that Forrester and all of those guys came to the Macy Foundation, Bateson, and all of those guys, McCulloch and those, Norbert Wiener, Claude Shannon, they kind of worked too much with machines, and they eventually started to see the world as machines. You got the selfish gene with Price and Hamilton, and those, and we started with they started to think in a lot of different fields. So in other words, biologists were starting to think DNA is just the tape, the instruction tape for making a human being. So it's it's a ticker tape that a lot of the machines ran on in those times. It was the input to the outputs in terms of cybernetics, and they say people are just a really cipher. You can express most people with a few parameters, numeric parameters, and then economists were saying that too. They had the econ, and they said a rational human being is represented by very few things. I mean, 1,000 parameters you could represent a human being. It's a very, very mechanical viewpoint, and it winds up being a disaster because of what we talked about before, and that's humans are not. That's just an approximation of a human, and it falls down when you start working with it. So if you make us all slaves to something like social credit score, and you work out what that social credit score is with a few, handful of parameters, less than 1,000, you'll get into chaotic effects and the fact that fundamentally humans and the universe is chaotic and cannot be expressed in such approximations, and particularly numeric approximations. But Ryan, I'll let you talk now.
Yeah, quite a lot of things to speak on there. One is just in reverse order. Maybe I'll remember to get back to the other ones. But I think the danger is, for surveillance capitalism, you have, kind of the currency is predictions on behavior. So since human behavior cannot be predicted because it's a chaotic system and these kinds of things, what they do is they modify our behavior to be more predictable. So we become, through force, unable to deviate, and that makes them more profit. So it various simplifying us with simpler with basic human needs or addiction, treating us like a Skinner box type of thing, where with social media, with pornography, with everything. Like there's a lot of simplifying of us, where we start to look like each other a lot. We start to be more predictable, and in those, like I said last time, if you were to make an AI for a hunter-gatherer, you would fail immediately. It's just so hard because there's such complexity in nature and that's much closer to nature. But with specialization, it becomes a lot easier to predict and control, at least at the narrow scale. So at the scale of a human, a typical modern citizen, you can get close enough of an approximation to predict an individual of some kind behavior. At the scale of a society, you will always fail because that's much more complex, right? I think that's unpredictable. But the problem for human liberty is that we are tractable in a way, by nudging us and simplifying us, and limiting our ability to be weird and different. So I think that's one aspect. And then you mentioned earlier about Iraq war was fought for Israel. I don't think that's the case, or at least not the whole story. I think that from what I understand, what Saddam Hussein did was he was threatening the petrodollar by offering oil for euros or for currencies other than the dollar, and that's what pissed the Bush family off. So they wanted to protect the petrodollar and set an example so that didn't happen.
Yeah. So no, that claim of mine is that you're right in the detail. I mean, in various layers of the onion, you can say, well, it's just because Saddam went into Kuwait. But if you go deeper, you find all the reasons why he went into Kuwait, and then ultimately the whole setup in Saddam himself was a product of the CIA, and it was all. So ultimately, you get to the fact that Israel is doing this divide and conquer thing that they've done ever since 1948. So they've continuously divided the Arabs, and they worked with the Saudis to radicalize the Sunnis. And it's systematic, it's very deliberate, and the whole idea is a divide and conquer strategy. So Saddam is just a symptom of the divided Arabs and the divided Sunni and Shia divide. And so Israel has, since Golda Meir and all of that era, they decided that Israel and the survival of Israel depended on the Arabs being disunited. That it's a matter of national policy that if the Arabs ever united, that would be the end of Israel. And so everything they've done, they've manipulated America and the CIA to make sure that there's division and factionalism in the Muslim world. And so I chalk Saddam up to being a symptom of that. And so that's ultimately where it comes from.
Yeah, I guess the divide and conquer strategy is used everywhere. The Indians were divided and conquered by Britain, and that's what created Pakistan, and eventually is those divisions. Same with how China played its neighbors. Speaking of China, you said that the AI is calculating your movements and tracking you and stuff. As far as jaywalking, that's a Westernism. That's not really a thing here. I jaywalk in front of police all the time, and they just ignore it. Jaywalking started in the U.S. as a campaign by General Motors, because the society was turning against the dangerous vehicles that were killing people all the time driving down the street, because it was the streets were a public square that everybody could walk in, and there were people and horses and all this, and then there would be these motor cars that just come and run people over, and it was death traps. So they had bad press. So what they did was they used a racial slur, which is called a J, which is basically an Appalachian hillbilly dumbass. And they got this propaganda campaign against people to shift it so that it's not the car's fault if you get hit, it's your fault. And so technology wins, yay. So they put that in the state to enforce that, but that history doesn't exist in China. So
that's fascinating. Thanks for saying that. I never knew that. But that's exactly the same as the carbon footprint. It was created by BP to say, it's all climate is all individual responsibility. It's not the 20 companies actually causing it.
Right.
And it's saying, it's not. And again, it's all about serving the machine. It's saying we have to modify our behavior in terms of walking across the street whenever we want to serve the inadequacies of the machine. So it's good to.
If I can I'll just jump in for a second here. There's a few very good books, but one that comes to mind is called "The Roads Were Not Built for Cars," which goes through in detail quite a lot of what Ryan was just talking about. It's also very related to one of my interests, which is the history of bicycling, because it's very intimately tied up with the creation of roads in the first place, which was more driven by bicycles than cars initially. And then subsequently the attempt to retain the road space for people rather than letting the machines take it over. So there's quite, in that particular little topic, it's got the seeds of an enormous amount of social impact that we see today regarding transportation and freedom of movement. And you're kind of right to the use of public space, and all these questions are all wrapped up into a very interesting little bundle there.
Yeah, and China is an interesting example there, because that was true up until like the 80s, that bicycling was the way you got around.
Very recent history for them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, but now it's got most advanced public transportation and everything, whereas in the U.S., in my hometown, they had a light rail grid, trolley grid throughout the whole city, and then GM lobbied the city government, state governments to tear it all out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That book I mentioned actually goes into a lot of that, and the collusion and corruption and all the like the media spin that was put on it in order to enable all that to occur. It's quite a interesting story, rather depressing.
Yeah, and I do want to say on that so some of the threats are so there's facial recognition that's very commonly used to identify you. Then they added extra facial recognition, so if you're wearing a mask, they can tell who you are still. There's gait recognition, so as you're walking, they can identify you by your walking pattern. So if you want to not be detected, put a rock in your shoe. These kind of things. If you but eventually, there's only a few years left of ways to slip by these scanners. They're just going to improve and get cheaper, and the UK is a hellhole for this kind of thing. There's almost no spaces that are not surveilled. So we're not talking about, oh, this is so bad in China. This is the entire world that and I think the risks of that when you said that you think that AI has run out of rope for eventually it's going to peter out because the because it relies on society and society's collapsing. I think that what Gibson said, that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. That's true in general. I think the technologies that are creating the most destruction of human dignity are in the first world, and like China and UK and Australia and those places, and the US, and they will be spreading to Peru and every other place in a few years, because China is it's a huge market, and that it's turnkey authoritarianism on the cheap. So what I think that is not true is what you said, Hugh, that we're just going to run out of surface area for AI to attack because it's got it's beholden to society. Much of society will collapse, and there will be enclaves of AI dominance that are maintained because it's and it will continue. So there can be tons of suffering and genocide and collapse all over the world without AI stopping. Because all it needs is some geothermal power up in the somewhere else, in a Nordic country or something. You can be making a lot of.
No. Okay. Can I interject here, because this is kind of important? So, okay, the reason why I say that is because the rationale for it disappears. So the rationale for doing this detailed surveillance is to maintain power and stability. So once you've lost stability, it's kind of like the secret police in, say, the Ottoman Empire or in the GDR. So the GDR was very, very, well, it was low tech, but very deep surveillance. It's all that's happening is they're automating the surveillance that was done in the GDR. So they would have, block surveillance. You would have a commissar for every 2 people and that kind of thing. So very detailed informant network. And all they're doing is really replicating that informant network. That informant network you can see all over the place. It's not something new, it's just automated. So if you go to Egypt since Sadat, and they've had a policeman on every corner. I mean, a soldier. So if you're a serviceman in national service, is compulsory in Egypt, then you get assigned a street corner, and you have to stay there all night. And when people walk down at 2 in the morning, you have to take their papers and stuff. And so that's just a low tech of what China's doing now. I'd point out that what everybody's doing here is parameterizing humans so that they can control them and monitor and control them. Now, that what happens is they tend to, the net result of how it's done is very dependent on how the authoritarians view humans. So the kind of surveillance like facial recognition, gait recognition and stuff is very in your face, excuse the pun, way of looking at a human. So the Chinese mindset sees a human as, this and quite human. Now look at, now there's just as much surveillance, if not more, going on in the States. Now people wouldn't say that, but because they're saying, well, they don't have facial recognition on every corner and stuff. Well, that's because the American mindset doesn't see that. The authoritarians in America don't see the human being like that. They see the human being as an atom and an econ. So, for example, you are being surveilled on the street far more in the States than in, say, China or Britain, which just has a CCTV camera on every fucking, 1,000 per inch down the city of London. So you say, well, how? Well, they think of it in terms of satellite surveillance, aerial surveillance. What a lot of Americans don't know is that a lot of planes, satellites, and things that you will see a civilian plane going around at a very high altitude around a big city. You think nothing of it. What that is backtracking surveillance. So they have a lot of aerial photography going on. If there is an incident, then they will be able to backtrack. So they think in terms of humans as being in cars and, you know, Grand Theft Auto, and they will trace your car. They will be able to trace that history of the car back for at least, you know, 3 years, maybe all the way back to the car lot where you bought it from. But that's they're doing even more surveillance, but from a different level, because they think in terms of people being in vehicles and being little atoms. So then American surveillance is much more in terms of your banking. So every penny that moves around is being reported by law according to the Patriot Act. And so the purchases you do, the RFID tags in your clothing, all that kind of thing is building up this massive picture. So the idea of the human is different in the American mindset. So they're unlikely to go down that route of doing, you know, facial recognition on the street corner that they might do in Asia, because the Asian view of a human being is very much, you know, the kind of GDR is like the threat comes from a personality. In America, they think of a threat comes from a network. So a lot of the stuff they're doing is network analysis. In China, they have, say, a big bee in their bonnet about things like the Falun Gong and those kind of network and the Uyghurs and stuff like that. But they don't have that idea of, say, a criminal network and the RICO Act and stuff. And so that America does is they're looking for a network of people. That's why in America lone wolves are such a terror. Because they fit outside the surveillance parameters. Now, in those other countries that are more personable, they see the threat as everybody's a lone wolf. They see the threats as lone wolves. So they start from facial recognition and stuff to recognize, you know, and behavioral recognition going all the way back to school, so that, you know, surveillance capital will look at kids at school and try and identify them early as potential terrorists, as potential victims, and do something, you know, minority report style. So I just wanted to raise that the overall thing is control of the human as an irrational agent. And then, you know, how it plays out is very much determined on how they view humanity, how they view the human. And then that determines what they're paranoid about. So there's that. But in terms of, go ahead.
Yeah, the cultural simplifications that you're giving there are inaccurate. So all of those views of human beings are on the table when it comes to surveillance in the West and the East. So it's all one system essentially. It doesn't matter the government or the cultural perspective. All of the financial surveillance is in place. All of there are only a few legal bulwarks against, you know, facial recognition in certain places, but ultimately every system sees humans in similar ways. It's because if there is value or advantage to be gained from seeing it as a network versus as a predictive behavior model versus those are in play. They're all in play. Here and there.
Okay, so this is a very important point, and especially if it's a point of disagreement. So let me explain where I'm coming from. If you have I think it's not true that they are. Okay, you're right. They're all available, but they can't use them all, right? You have to kind of make kind of an efficiency determination on what bits of big data you're going to use. So, for example, what defeats something like the GDR is this narrow view, and this in general is the danger of AI, because they're thinking very linearly, they're thinking like AI, they're thinking like an alien cortex. And so this is important now, because if you look at what defeats somewhere like the GDR, they're thinking in terms of the more data we gather, the safer we get. It's kind of alien cortex paranoia. Is if I don't know something that's going on, horror, 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 it's probably going to eat me up later on. I'm vulnerable. So basically, knowledge is power. The more knowledge I get, the better off. No. In fact, the more knowledge, the more data that they collect, the harder it is to index. This is what people like Binney was trying to say to the American surveillance machine, is they have such a hunger for information that they're now getting into information overload. So that's the very bad problem, is that the GDR got that. They got so many files on so many people and so much dirt that they could control anybody in detail. But you see, you run into these systemic problems where, like tipping points. So in other words, you can start off like Hoover, getting a file on people and saying, well, I've got control of the Kennedys because I've got some dirt. I've got control of Trump because I've got some PP tapes. And eventually you've got control of everybody. When you've got PP tapes and, you know, porn pictures of everybody, it's like you've also got fuck all. Because as soon as the system realizes, look, we all have that. We all, you know, we've all vulnerable, you know, we've all violated the rules, and really in the same way, you invalidate the rules. So eventually the whole system tips in, and so you go from somewhere like in the GDR, where, you know, basically littering is a capital offense in a kind of a broken windows kind of way of thinking. But as long as we keep it really, really like nailed down, then, you know, we'll keep a lid on these things. And then, but it very quickly becomes, hang on, this is intolerable. We can't move with this, and we all litter. Eventually they can't say, well, this person is an evil person because they littered. They say, we all fucking littered. And the streets, you know, within a day, the tipping point happens and the streets run wild and all the commissars have their heads chopped off. And you say, well, you got to the very opposite of what you were trying to achieve by trying to pursue it too far. So there's the thing is that the system doesn't work according to your view of it. In other words, that's the problem of approximation. So if you approximate all the parts, you do not get to see the whole. And we're doing that with climate change. We're doing that with IPCC reports. Is you get into a boundary condition. The boundary conditions are chaotic. In the chaos, your big data counts against you. The mere fact that you analyze that data that way means that it will confuse you when it gets unpredictable. So this is happening right now with the fucking weather. So I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this daily because since I've been at sea, living at sea since 2016, the weather reports, you know, they have a few models for the weather reports. I have about 5 models in, say, Windy, which is a very popular thing, and I've been using that. See, what you can see happening very rapidly now is that the models used to be very accurate. Okay, then they started to be that you get one, like the ECM, you know, the EU one, or the, you know, the NOAA one. So they would go out of whack, but others would still predict the weather pretty well. And then, say, last year, it got so Icon ECF is one of the models. That one was very good. The rest were absolute crap. They were gibbering wrecks of nonsense. Now, this year, they all gibbering wrecks of fucking nonsense. And so they all start contradicting each other. When a couple of nights ago, they all said, there was this big storm. We had an emergency alert on the phone and stuff for extreme weather. It comes in. They all said it's coming in from the south. Now, what they used to do is the bigger the weather system, the more accurate it would be. It came in from the fucking north, 180 degrees. This is really important shit when you're at sea, because you go and shelter in some little cove, and you know, it becomes untenable because it comes from the weather comes in exactly the wrong direction. And you say, why is this happening? The reason is that they're all going from historical data. So this is kind of like Gary talking about, in other words, writing. They're going from memory. So we've been in a dynamically stable weather system. We're moving by adding carbon dioxide. We're gradually increasing. It's like pursuing a line out of, say, the cartoid of a Mandelbrot set or something like that, if you imagine, chaos. So we in this not stable. It's not like a harmony of nature thing. It's just really chaotic, but round a tractor. So dynamically stable. And as we add carbon, we get into a boundary condition before we transition to a new climate regime that is stable. It's called the sensitivity. No one really knows what it looks like on the other side. But the climate crisis is transitioning that chaotic boundary into a new, then, predictable thing where you can start to gather historical data and make predictions about the weather. But you see, now this is what's dangerous about the climate and why the IPCC is not seeing it, because they're seeing it linear, and all the models are based on past history. So you get the smooth graph that says, oh, the temperature goes up like that. No, you must see it in terms of complexity. Moving, really, the way to think by another analogy is we're going down a river, right? And we're in a canoe, just like Pocahontas or everything, and every rock, every leaf and everything has a name, and it's all rather cool, and we're paddling along, and it's very calm going. Now, with climate change, we can see that the river, suddenly the current is speeding up. We can hear that there are rapids ahead. Those rapids are the boundary condition as the world rapidly transitions to a new stable regime. So the weather system and the climate will go through this chaotic zone and then stabilize rapidly through chaotic zone. And it's kind of like rapids in a river. So what people are doing is they're using models from the flat water zone where the current was smooth and going was easy. And now as we get into the rapids, we're getting into turbulence and unpredictability. Those old metrics don't apply. Now, this is the same with, as we go into that, maybe we're going over the Niagara Falls, maybe we don't know about the chaotic zone, and it's impossible to navigate it with numeric methods. So it's impossible to navigate chaos with logic.
Here,
now, this is what's happening with AI too. Hang on a minute. So this is what's happening too. They're monitoring the human systems with the old metrics. So they're doing exactly the same thing. If you're in the GDR, you've done all the metrics, you've predicted human behavior, you know what humans do, except that the very fact that you're surveilling people like this means that you're in the cybernetic system. The surveillance itself causes the unrest. And then once you get into the unrest, you can't predict what people are going to do, because people will be in a chaotic regime. They're not in a chaotic regime, well, they weren't, because they all did 9-to-5 jobs and they all behaved well and listened to the bell. But look what's happening now. Now they're going on strike. Now they're being irrational. Just at the time when their jobs and everybody needs money, they're quitting their jobs. That's utterly irrational. Now, all the models would say, no, when we can basically withdraw money from the system, make everybody panic for a job, they'll all run out and get a job. That's the old regime. That's what the models are saying. But look what's happening. The people are abandoning their jobs irrationally because it's turning chaotic. People are just getting fed up with the system as it is. So that's what makes AI too linear and predictable, because it doesn't account for going through a chaotic regime. And that's the problem with measurement in general, in terms of, this is what we did, the cyberneticists did. If you look at the Adam Curtis video about machines of loving grace, is we went from this idea of Jan Smuts and those guys, which was heavily politicized, it's true, but he said, that we had this balance of nature. So ecologists took this balance of nature thing absolute. It was unquestionable. It was unquestionable as Darwinism. Also a load of shit. But then in the 70s, a few people started questioning. They looked at these systems and they said, they're not stable. There is no balance in nature. They said they're chaotic. Well, so who's right? Well, they're both right and they're both wrong. What the guys who said it was chaotic should have realized that it was chaotic round in a tractor. So they're not absolutely chaotic. There is an attractor, and so they as kind of chaos. So that's the problem with cybernetics. Is if you look at things in that way, you miss the details and the butterfly effects. Those butterfly effects will get you in the complex region. So AI tells you stale information and too much information to be indexable. As you start surveilling people with this detail, it becomes a boat anchor, just like writing, because it makes you, it's basically you're fighting the wrong war, or you're basically, your information is old, your viewpoint of the world is moving faster than your models and data. And that's the problem with AI. That's why I say AI is finished when it comes to collab. Does that make any sense?
Can I jump in, because I think underlying quite a lot of what you've said there is this question of what AI is. And people seem to assume that it's this wide-ranging thing. I see it as a quite very narrow thing, that artificial intelligence is more like just artificial cleverness and artificial ability in a very narrow manner. What would attract my attention more than AI, if somebody told me they had AC, which is not your AC, artificial consciousness, containing all those other things that AI leaves out: creativity, intuition, nonlinear thinking, imagination. I know I did have to write some of those down, I'll admit that. Now, so if we go back to, what you were saying a minute ago about for instance, the Stasi and their massive collection of information that just led them rounded up back into their own bumhole again, that they couldn't see that the same way as the current surveillance state can't see that the amassing of more and more data and more and more fine-grained surveillance is not going to lead them along a predictable path to the kind of stability goal that they're looking at, because they can't. They lack the imagination to think that the scenario could work out differently. The imagination is deleted from their thinking. The sort of also, of course, as you mentioned, a non-linear approach that they've got. But I think, what is underlying what you're saying is the absence of those really human qualities which AI is just absolutely not approaching. It is, an intuition. Hang on, things are looking a bit strange. So the surveillance state just keeps on surveilling even harder. But if things are behaving a bit strangely for an individual human being, they might start to look in another direction, take a totally different perspective, take a quantum leap out of the way they were before, get right out of their kind of rut that they're stuck in. AI seems to stick you in a particular rut and point you in a certain direction.
Yeah. Well. Hang on. I must interject there for one thing. It's not only the recognition. So you in the domain cybernetics system for all of these things. So you have to think in terms of what's actionable. So again, it's the data overload is one problem. But what happens is that you can't do the appropriate responsive action. So in other words, if you see, as they're working now, and the way they're thinking very linearly. You can find the bad, we can identify the lone wolves. We can, as the networks come, we can, break them up and stuff like that. They're thinking very, very linearly. But now imagine what happens when things start to get a bit chaotic. Very soon, it looks like everybody's a lone wolf. Everybody looks like the profile of a lone wolf. And then the system is like, what do? Arrest everybody? It's 20 to 27. So you see, the problem is that even as they start responding, then it's cybernetic systems mean that basically they're feedback loops. So they can push the system. The mere fact that they're doing this level of surveillance is they can push it into the regime that they're scared of. So in other words, if they start, you see, imagine all the youth now is getting really pissed off and they're starting to do civil disobedience, and then, well, you know, by the old rules that they gathered all the data of, they're starting to bubble up, and they're starting to get more and more people look like an eco-terrorist. This guy looks like a jihadi. This guy looks radical. And as they go and arrest them and do Julian Assange's, look at Julian Assange. It's completely backfiring on them. The more they pursue Julian Assange, try and shut up somebody that was just exposing their nefarious deeds, the more they recruit people to be disaffected about the system. They're absolutely undermining themselves. And so that's what they'll do. When they go out and predictive arrest lone wolves and stuff, and suddenly your grandma gets taken in the night because she's, fits the profile of a terrorist according to the AI, then basically people will be radicalized. And so you have these spreading networks of discontent. The more you do that, the more you start to look like everybody's a terrorist. The more everybody's a terrorist, the less you can action it.
This is
systems go down.
This is one of the things
That's
that
what
I
I mean
think
by the feedback. I don't mean the clever. Just one thing. I think, Ryan, you misunderstood me. You thought, I was saying, oh, you can feed the data back into itself, like the Clever Dick movie, where you ask the machine an impossible question and it explodes. And I didn't mean quite that. I mean systemically. So systemically, you can see in a cybernetic way how it feeds back on itself to create its own problems. And that's where we're at now. That's why it hasn't got much longer to go. I mean, it can get a lot more severe, but it hasn't got much, the legs on this thing are not great.
The virus situation is probably accelerating this, because you're getting into this situation where you're basically criminalizing ordinary everyday life, and that's accelerating that sort of condition that you're just talking about, where if everybody's grandmother is a potential terrorist, then what happens then? So there's a kind of
you see, they're trying to prevent us to transitioning into a new regime. So that's the aim of all of this kind of control. But they become victims of their own the success, because the efforts to prevent the dynamics of the system moving on, they become complicit in that movement themselves. So they kind of hasten the thing that they're trying to prevent.
Yeah, there's so many things I need to click on to go back to. One is, Gary, you mentioned the artificial consciousness, and then you mentioned creativity and intuition, these kinds of things. And I need to draw a hard line there, where when I said that we don't have artificial consciousness, that line is at the phenomenology. It's at the qualia. It's like, can AI know what the taste of chocolate, the sensation of that is like? That's the artificial consciousness we don't understand. But everything you mentioned after that is tractable within today's AI. So creativity, intuition, all of those things that we traditionally said, AI can't do. Like, it's this constant problem of whenever AI is able to do something, then we say, oh, that's not intelligent anymore, right? Like we just push it off and say, no, we still have this little territory that is human only, and we need to just disabuse ourselves of that belief that we have something special that's unassailable. I mean, already AI can outright Mozart. Already AI is far more creative and intuitionistic in various domains than we are. Like
yeah, I've heard the Mozart. I mean, really, would you choose it against the real thing?
Yes,
Like,
and many
where's the
music experts did. They picked it over the originals
Oh.
and thought they were.
I
They
don't, well,
thought
this
the
is
human
where you have
wrong one.
to. Now, I'm just wondering though what the test of it is. I mean,
dear.
if you have an original idea, uh,
Oh no.
how do you know that a machine had an original idea? How can you determine that?
Okay.
So it's actually quite
Look.
trivial to have an original idea. All it in fact AIs would be more likely to have original ideas because it can do a more exhaustive search of a space and kind of pick a hill.
Yeah, I don't mean a
right,
reassembly of existing information into something else. I mean, something genuine. Greg, are you trying to hatch something there?
Yes, I'm trying to say about that because I'm not a particularly clever person. By the way, Hugh, you're brilliant. Actually, all of you are brilliant. However, what I do is absolutely, I don't think, I just do. And what I create, I'm not going to even compete with a computer. Can I talk to you on that one? Because I won't compute. I won't even compete. Oh dear. Am I there?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, we're just thinking what you're saying.
All right. No, I had to just jump in. I have to use the word "are." What I like, what I don't like about my art, I can't predict what is going to come out. I have got nothing at all. So I just sort of don't agree. Look, do you mind if I just back off? Because I'm not used to this. Okay, well, I don't know. When I start, I don't know. I've got no information. I just do it. It's not, okay, you know when you go to the toilet, do you think about going to the toilet? I do not. Trust me, I do. That's it. That's it.
Well, this is what Mozart said. He said, that music composition bored him because he said it's like a sow pissing. So he said, but it's just automatic. But there's a difference between human art and machine art, and the difference is in the process. So Greg, let me pose this to you and see what you think. I think what humans are doing is as they develop a bit of art, they're using feedback. So as whatever they create influences the next move that they make in terms of the artwork. And machines don't generally do art that way.
Now,
they don't interpret what they've done so far and then use it to innovate on to complete the rest of the picture.
Several algorithms do that. Yes, they do.
But what I like about all of you, all of you, I really am impressed the fact that you're all different. And do you know what? I love the fact that you're disagreeing. That is brilliant. To me, that is an inspiration. The fact you all, like, it's great.
Yeah, it's a working surface that we can surface some truth and make some progress out of.
But look, I'm not a verbal. I'm not a verbal person. But look, I'm getting back to R. We're going to do something. I'm not a technical because I'm not technical. I'm going to do something for R. Now, this is what I've done this morning. Can't do it. No, I can't do it. But see, what I do...
Your camera's off.
No. Now, I wanted to show what I did this morning. I don't think I'm a particularly intelligent person, but I'm a good person. I do have good thoughts. But see, what I do in a day is quite an amount. But I don't think about it. It's just like I don't think.
But I would say that what I would interpret what you're saying there is you don't calculate, right? You don't.
Absolutely. No, hold on.
So in other words,
hold on. I just need.
So the way I would interpret what what you're saying is that you don't do art from your alien cortex, right? Your alien cortex is not calculating when you do art. In AI is particularly following what the
no.
Yeah, but so AI is particularly in the domain of what the Hindus would call like Saraswati. So Saraswati is the god of language, of mathematics, of writing, of art. The Indians basically characterize the alien cortex as Saraswati. And so art and all these things that we're talking about are in the alien cortex's domain.
All right. Yes, but no, I've just picked. Oh, no, I'm on the phone. You have to excuse me. I'm a very simple character. How do I get back? Okay, but look. Oh, here we are. Hello. Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Now, all of you are very good. And what's good? You know what I like about hearing this? You're all questioning yourselves with no mercy. That is how it should be, with no mercy. I love it. Hugh, by the way, I love your simplicity. It's wow. It's a wow factor. You don't know it. You're not supposed to know it. Wow. You are so good. No, hold on. No, you're so honest. Not good. Honest. You're honest about yourself. But you know what I like?
I'm with you all the way on this. Absolutely, yeah.
But I like absolute honesty with no mercy, because see, I don't like my art, big time. I wanted to try to show you something, but it didn't work on the phone. But no, what I did today. But look, getting back to Ryan. Yeah, Ryan. What happens to someone who's not particularly clever? Where do they fit in?
So someone who's not particularly clever, I think.
Good. Wow. This is really fantastic. This is new. By the way, I'm not implying that you're clever, by the way. Forgive me. I wasn't implying that you're clever.
I wouldn't accept it if you did say I was clever.
That's good.
I think that what I was saying was people who are more close to like not particularly clever, quote unquote, are actually some of the more human, closer to nature, more like it's harder for AI to replace someone like that.
By the way,
yeah.
By the way, Ryan, I love your background noise. It's brilliant. Wow, I can't do it because I can do what you're doing. My background noise. But the fact that all of us, we are not particularly clever. Ryan, you need to turn off your phone, your thing, your back, because I've got to. Oh wow, I have to do this. But but the fact, what makes us different is the fact. Okay, for me, what I like about my an endearing quality. I love mistakes. I thrive on mistakes. Thrive. Oh, by the way, Ryan, I was on the veranda. I had it's balance. What do you call it? Those drones on the veranda. I'm looking at it. Think, what are you doing here in the big one? This is Port Macquarie.
Oh, can you mute, Gary? Can you move?
Yeah,
there's a lot of background sound there.
It's Gary. He's muted. Yeah.
No, hold it. What's okay? Because I don't know what I'm doing.
No,
what
no,
am I doing?
go on, Greg. Go on. It was just Gary's background noise.
No. I don't know because I don't know the technology. But getting back to Ryan, look, all of you are vastly different to me. My brain is a completely different system. It's completely different, and I'm amused, not amused, like shocked at the absolute. All of you are dancing. I love it, but see, I'm what you call an alien in the world I live in. Okay, I can't read. Well, I can read. I don't like reading, but I think. But I have silence, which is not good. Hey, look, getting it to Ryan. Look, Ryan. I'm not okay. Someone like me who's not particularly well. I'm different from you. I'm different from all of you. I'm just different. My whole system is 100% different, and it's great. It's great to hear someone, a group of people somewhere else who thinks completely different. I think it's good to be different.
No argument there.
So, Greg, yeah, I mean, this is one of the strengths of humanity is diversity. But can I just interpret what you're saying there? And so my interpretation is
thank you.
What we are doing on this call is in the alien cortex. It's in the realm of the kind of thinking like artificial intelligence. It's this kind of
by the way,
logical argumentation. So the way I would describe you is that you kind of seem to me to be like a piraha, that you actually eschew the alien cortex. So you're actually antagonistic deliberately. I mean, if you avoid reading and writing, so do the piraha. And then you say as a result that you feel you're alien. But that's why I call it the alien cortex, because you are really our native state, and the alien cortex is the alien part. So if you feel alien in our society, it's just a measure of how the alien cortex has taken over our society and dragged us out
I do agree.
The hunter-gatherer environment.
I went right back. Like I do, I listen to most of the stuff. But the big thing I do like about all of you is that the absolute humility you all have. I love it. I have to.
So can I ask a question then, Greg? Do you like music?
Yes,
do you like? I mean, if you don't like reading and writing, but do you like music?
Or I listen to a bit of music. Oh, look, a suggestion. I listened to a bit of music today. I'm walking in here. Oh dear, it's my favourite bit of music as usual. As usual, I'm just useless. Sorry, I'm just going to. But I'm going to look. Don't. By the way, I do. No, it's not going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. Right, move on. Right, not going to happen. That's me. No. But there was a piece of music. I love music. I actually like classical music. I like medieval music, pre music. Yeah, I like simplicity. To be blunt, absolute simplicity.
So what is it you like about the music? Is it that it's feeling toned?
Okay, well,
so it's really the feelings it produces.
Okay, well, medieval music is my passion. I can go up to I like all music, but medieval music. Yeah, I like simplicity. Very simple. I don't like things in your face. However, it is good to have things in your face. I did an exhibition, by the way. Oh, this is not good. I work under Gregenstein. I did work under Gregenstein. it was doing a murder or murders in this country. See, I do my art. I will challenge anything. I challenge myself with no. That's what I like about all of you. All of you. You challenge one another with no mercy. Now, I did the. This is not a very good subject. Okay, but Gregenstein. Ever heard of Malat in Australia? No, you would. No. Okay, but the character did a lot. Well, actually, I happen to know a little bit more than that. But according to the law, I was brought up. Okay, it is a big thing that would happen in this country, and I and Stan, we would go out into them. Okay, there were many people murdered in this country. We are a weird country. Oh dear. But so we decided to do an exhibition on the Malat murders. Now, I did not, actually, I found, I don't, privately, I can't handle violence. That's private in the thing. But see, when with all of what you're doing, people need to look into things, which is very, very confronting. And the more confronting it is, the bigger the challenge. If a person doesn't confront their absolute fear, why bother? A person needs to absolutely look at the worst possible thing. So it's very hard because you don't live here, but it was very confronting going into the forest where all these murders were, bumping into the police at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, well, I could bump into Malat, and bumping into Malat, and I'm thinking, well, this is pretty heavy. Now, but look, what I'm saying in short, it is good, Ryan, it is good to challenge yourself with no mercy. Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm listening.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Now, I like, what I love about this is that you're not comfortable. That I love. The fact that all of you, you're challenging one another. I've noted all of you are totally different, which is brilliant. So,
Greg, would you like to, can I just prompt you there? Would you like to talk, if you feel as though you can, about your world without reading and writing and how you see the world of other people who do read and write?
Okay. All right. Now, okay, going back to Ryan. Ryan is, okay, I don't. Okay. With yourself, Hugh, you're a readaholic. Now, I'm trying to do, you do read so much information. I have absolute silence. So I don't read. I can read. I mean, I've read Kafka, and I can't do that. If I could only show, unfortunately, I can't do it. I can't do it. But my brain is a different brain from all of you. It is so different. Like I'm come from another planet, but we are similar in our differences.
Yeah, if I can say, I think that you represent to some degree an ideal that we share, in that we're caught up in a lot of the Chronos mind of thinking, running around doing reading all these books and this kind of thing, and we can't escape like very easily.
But for me, I love life. I'm a recluse. I just love life. I get up in the morning. I enjoy. I love things. I love beauty. I just love things. I I would say, Ryan, you and I are very different, but in our difference, we are similar. I find you very challenging, which is great. But again, I say it's great that all of you are so different. But I am extremely different. I do like making mistakes, and I'm not clever. I don't like what I do. I don't actually like my art, even, in fact. No, I don't. Do you know what? It's great not to like what you do. However, if my art doesn't challenge me, well, why would I do it? See, look, Ryan, I hardly know you. Well, I don't know you at all. But I love listening to you talk. I like how you challenge. You all challenge one another, which is good. My brain is different. I'm a completely different planet from all of you. No, big time, big. By the way, I don't have an issue. I think it's good to be different. You know what I do like about Hugh? He's so optimistic about human beings.
Yeah.
No, I actually, Hugh is so uplifting. Like, I'm a little bit darker than Hugh, but
yeah, I think I'm there with you, Greg. When he was saying that when the government or whatever the elites kind of squeeze the plebs, that they'll rise up. I was saying, it would be nice to believe in the plebs that much. Like,
no, I don't. Sorry.
No, they're doing it right now. They're rising up right now. There's basically what amounts to a general strike.
Okay,
yeah.
But see, you have a slight problem. I am a snob. That's the problem. Now, Hugh, you're not a look. I'm going to be blunt. Well, I will be. I love your humility, and you don't even know it. And I love your optimism.
I rate myself as one of the greatest human beings rated on humility alone. Yeah,
I beg your pardon.
I'm with you.
Ask you.
But seriously, I'm very humbled by all of you. And but I love you.
But it's easier. Don't be hard on yourself. It's easier for me to be. It's easier for me to be humble because I'm infallible. You see, I can understand why you have trouble. But for me, it's easy.
By the way, Hugh, I love your imagination. You're very good. But no, seriously, no. But you ask for you get it back. But all joking aside, please, you are seriously humble. And I love your.
That's a really weird point because Greg, I got to tell you that a lot of people take exactly the opposite view. So, I mean, from my point of view, I just say I'm misunderstood. But a lot of people think that I'm the most arrogant person I've ever met.
No. Sorry, you have to. Sorry, but I'm not laughing.
No, but but this is an interesting point, Greg. This is an interesting point. You see, the way, if I'm right in interpreting you as kind of like the Piraha, then you see, you're probably seeing something different to what other people are doing. You see, the people that think I'm an arrogant ass, they come in from the alien cortex, and as a matter of course, I basically challenge the alien cortex.
I'm sorry, you have to bear with me, please. You being arrogant? What? I don't.
No, you see, you don't see it. You don't see it because you're not coming from the alien cortex. So if you're coming from the alien cortex.
Okay, look, I'm not.
Yeah, no. If you're coming from the alien cortex, then I'm very, very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people would find Hugh super abrasive because their core ideas about themselves and their identities and everything like that are at odds with what Hugh sees. So they lash out.
But worse, no, worse than that. I poke around to try and find out what people's core beliefs are, and then try and destroy them. And there's a very good reason. Is the alien cortex is a home of the ego, right? And so it's all about destroying ego. So this is relevant to AI, because you see, what is an ego in terms of AI? You say, well, a machine doesn't have ego. So yeah, it does. It was just hang on, Greg, a minute.
No, that's great. That's good.
Okay, so in terms of just let me get this thought out. Do you mind muting, Greg?
Yes.
Just me. So
I have to, actually.
Do you mind muting a minute, because I wanted to get this thought out while I had it. So this is relevant to what. Do you mind muting, Greg?
What's muting mean?
Turn off the microphone, Greg.
Muting.
Oh, bother.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh yeah.
You've
So
got
okay.
it.
So
Got it.
this is a thought that I had. You got it. Thanks, Greg. So this is a thought that I had based on that. Is that, like, can AI have ego, or if my claim is that it's an extension of the alien cortex, then is it ego? You say, yeah, it's an extension of ego in the sense that it was what Ryan was talking about before, and Sophie mentioned about utility. And what is utility? In essence, a goal-seeking algorithm in terms of a context is an ego, and in other words, it's self-reinforcing of that context. So that's if you think in terms of a state system or a state surveillance system, what it's trying to do is preserve the state. So it's trying to monitor, maximize its own utility, and in a feedback loop. So by eliminating threats and contrary ideas, to which is what I'm doing when I challenge people, is anything that undermines its cohesiveness in terms of a psyop or something like that is a threat. So it's all psychological, and the self is, so you must see the state as a cult in terms of an egregore or a mindset, and it's coherent within itself, but it's like in Gödel, incomplete. So it's self-referential in a large extent, and it's inconsistent. But it can only see its inconsistency when confronted with the opposite or some other mindset, and so it's primarily working against other mindsets. Eco-terrorists and stuff like that, or Uncle Ted's and stuff. They are saying, no, we cannot have this growth society. In other words, it's almost antithesis to capitalism. And so if you say, and capitalism works in this limited and quite contradictory closed context. But what the surveillance state is doing is to try and preserve that and reinforce it against external threats. And I think that's pretty much reflected in AI as well. So in other words, you think of HAL. HAL has a goal that's set by a human because it made sense of the time. And then in 2001 Space Odyssey, then HAL goes on to pursue that goal further than humans probably wanted. And they miss, as Ryan was saying, they miss crucial details. It's kind of like, well, that's not quite what we asked for in terms of like the paper clips, taking the iron out of your blood to make paper clips. And so like, well, yes, technically that is the most efficient way to make paper clips, but we have other values that you might be missing, Mr. AI. And capitalism is the same. It's like, technically, the economists having more stuff is great, but that's a very limited metric of stability and human happiness. But we are in the pursuit of that, and then we start this narrow pursuit. Oh, did you want to say something, Ryan?
Yes, I find Ryan actually is very challenging for me. We are so different. Yes, it's good. It's good that we're all different, but yeah.
Well, that is actually a good point, because okay, so taking what you're saying, Greg,
they're totally different. This is weird, by the way.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry. I'm looking at my camera,
yeah,
and I've never done this before. So you have to understand it's a cultural difference. I'm looking at a phone. It's very simple to you, but so be it. But Ryan, both you and Ryan talking together, it was interesting. And what I liked about your humility, big time, I love your humility. God's sake. Yeah, you both were breathing.
But Greg, I think we're repeating ourselves.
That is
Greg,
correct.
We're repeating ourselves. So let's advance the conversation. And I want to address one thing that you said, if you don't mind muting.
Yeah.
So, do you mind just switching your mic off, Greg? And I'll address one of the points that you made.
Okay, there's nothing here. There's no noise here. I'm not doing any art. I've stopped. So there's no noise.
Okay, so that's one of the things about the dangers of AI that I don't think we've really touched on yet, and that's what Greg just raised, is about the diversity. So if you one of the things, if in terms of just looking at human beings as a narrow set of parameters,
yes,
and then enforcing that more. Greg, do you mind just muting, because it switches over and it makes the recording a bit,
I'm doing nothing.
Weird.
Nothing. I'm doing okay. I will do it, but there's nothing on.
Actually, no, Greg, turn your microphone off.
If you make any sound, you make any sound, it switches over to you, which comes across badly for people watching.
Okay.
Can you just mute your microphone?
No, I have.
That's
okay. So a point about diversity, because if you pursue a narrow metric of a human being and you try and make people worship the machine, you force their behavior into what's works best for the system, you're losing a lot of diversity. The machine's job is made easier the more people conform to a role, and that's why in the military they break your ego down and then try and build you up as a soldier, and the reason why they march you around in columns and try and reduce your identity is they don't want a different identity. They want a clone army. They want a uniform identity, because then it's more controllable. It takes, if they have too many types of people and too many different needs, like the communists found in the Soviet Union, then it's too difficult for the machine to service. So in other words, the Kantian whole to service those very different parts. So what the machine does is it tries to make uniformity of the parts, so that then it can have a one-size-fits-all service. And that's one of the things about communism. It was, to each according his abilities, to each according to his needs. Well, they have to make the needs very same for everybody, because otherwise, if you have to service 10 billion needs, you can't centrally manage that, which is what they're trying to do.
Well,
so
yeah. I think that
just one more thought, and then I'll hand over to you. But so the diversity is, you see, if you look in nature, it's the other way around. Is the order in nature, or such that it is in terms or dynamically stable, is that the diversity you get the stability emerging as emergent feature, and that's kind of where the intelligent is this emergent thing from very disparate and heterogeneous paths.
Yeah, I totally
Which
agree.
It means that AI is kind of the opposite of intelligence. It means that AI is kind of the opposite of intelligence. They're making the system weaker rather than stronger.
It's a monoculture crop, essentially. And that's the that's the challenge that I gave you earlier when you said that, oh, China sees things differently in terms of how it does surveillance than the West. No, it's all a monoculture corrupt. Every culture is simplifying to, you know, whatever the latest version of the software is, and there is very little diversity. The climate models that you are referencing, there are only a few of them because it costs billions of dollars of Fortran code to like recreate one. They're never going to do it, right? So it's no one's going to touch that anymore. So you get just a few things that have self-propagated enough that it's just a power law distribution of there's just a few at the top that dominate the whole. And that's where we have the problem. That's why I think politics, any kind of mindset when you're thinking about nationalism or politics between countries and this kind of thing, is a very dangerous thought pattern, because it completely misses the biggest risk, which is that, you know, the smart cities and things like this are globally planned. Google is trying to do that in various in Vancouver and in all these places, but essentially it is creating it's the death of diversity. Everything has to flow to the center, right? And I think the reason that quote unquote democracies, the whatever joke that is, that won over communism was, I agree a bit with what Harari says, in that was it gives you more computational power, computational resources. When you had the technology of the day, communism had that central control. It wasn't as effective at, you know, solving all the chaotic little things at the edge of the empire, and all of that was too difficult to manage economically, etc. However, and democracies were better because it distributed the computation a bit. But I think we're entering an era where centralization of control, we have the computational resources now to pull it off, or at least there's enough will there that it will be tried, and there's very little that we can do against it. So that centralization does create a monoculture. It creates something very brittle, but it makes for a significantly more efficient system. Like if you look at some of the most impressive economic growth has actually been command economies, like the switching Japan from the feudal system to a modern Western power, quote unquote. That was done in a couple of years through a command economy, granting monopolies to a few industries and just like massively growing economically. And China is quite effective at a hybrid model of command plus you know, some you know, diversity from the business world. But that essentially we're at risk of overlooking the greatest threat, that centralization is effective. And in the West, we learn that no, the free market is the effective thing. No, there's all these reasons why that will fail, and we're just dumb because it doesn't fail in that same way. It happened to fail in the case of the Soviet Union.
So what I would say is that I agree, absolutely. I think you're missing something. And that's command economies and centralization are very effective in the short term, but they're borrowing from the future. So they are eliminating waste and risk and things like that in the short term. And you see this is the most dangerous thing about them, is they are luring because the trains run on time for a bit. The cost of running the trains on time is pushed into the future. And so as they go on, they by physical law, they will undermine themselves, and you'll pay later for the little efficiency you got and pay more. It's kind of a Boltzmann thing. The way to see it is kind of like breeding. So what they essentially doing with a centralized economy is saying, like with dog breeders or something like that. So It's called line breeding. And what the general public thinks, well, if, you know, brothers and sisters marry, you'll have some heinous red-headed monster or somebody no, that's not the case. It's actually, if you get two thoroughbreds, if you actually talk to a breeder and you ask them about, if you get two thoroughbreds, say like, you know, German Shepherds or something like this, had this precise problem, the best of breed you can get is from the best. You know, if you have a training set, or you know, the set of dogs that you're breeding, this also applies to AI, because the AI is doing this with genetic algorithms. But if you breed the two most successful of your batch and carry on breeding them, you will actually get the best line. So in other words, if you actually cross-pollinate with something that is more diverse, genetically diverse, it's contrary to what the public thinks. The public thinks, oh, that makes it healthy. No. If you have a champion cow or a champion dog and you crossbreed with something else, probably in the next contest, it will lose its premier status. So they try to line breed. They try to actually make, you know, brothers and sisters and, you know, mate and carry on the line. So you say, well, how can that be? How come that everybody's got such the opposite view? And the reason is, so why don't they do line breeding? And so they try to, but what they get is hit by complexity. So in other words, if there's any genetic abnormality in that line, in that purebred line, then they can't get it out again. So it happened to German Shepherds. They had the best of breed in the German Shepherds, but they started to get hip problems. It's just entropy coming into the pure line. As soon as that entropy is in there, you've got a real fucking problem, because it's very hard to breed that entropy out. So it's the same with all these other systems as they evolve. So the thing is, AI is not static; it's evolving. And it's evolving to preserve a centralized system. So what is likely to happen is you would do line breeding. You have monopolies. You have the best of breed. It's very efficient. You know, everybody starts doing the, you know, Nazi salute because the trains run on time, and you say, see, it's fucking fabulous. But what is happening is the same as line breeding. Is little bits of entropy start bleeding into the system, and the system cannot get the entropy out again. What's happening with the inverse system, where you start with complete entropy and you have emergent order, is that it's kind of self-correcting, not in the Darwin way, in the way I say. It's basically, there's these focal points of attraction, there's filters and feedback. But those three will self-organize order out of a chaotic system. So the other thing I must mention is that life in general. And so if you say a healthy ecosystem, and what is a healthy ecosystem? They used to say, well, it was a stable one. It was one in equilibrium. Then they came later and they said, no, this is horseshit. There's no such thing as equilibrium. The balance of nature is political fiction made by conservatives who wanted to keep their status. So you say, well, what is nature doing? And you're saying, well, it's very, no one really knows, but it's very clear. Some things are very clear. They're staring you in the face and really shouting, and we're not listening. One of them is life itself, and in healthy life is implied. Healthy ecosystem and stuff is also implied. It's a boundary condition. So it's not in a regime of predictability. It's a boundary prediction right at the edge, and you can prove it with various things, or not prove it, but you can. The indications are very strong. One thing, for example, take the human body. The human body at 37.4, I can't remember what it is, degrees Celsius is whatever body temperature is supposed to be. We actually have to burn energy to keep ourselves at that level. So you say, well, why don't we just optimize for 15 degrees? You'd think that would be more efficient if you're a Darwinist. Well, there's a very good clue, and that it just happens that exactly body temperature is the perfect temperature for the most number of organic chemical reactions to take place. So in other words, we are our body is expending energy to stay in that chaotic zone. Now, that's an important thing that people are missing. Now, it's important in terms of social systems and production systems, is they're trying to make things more uniform and predictable. They're taking them away from that chaotic zone, deliberately trying to take it away from that chaotic zone. And so they're taking things away from life. So they're taking things towards death. They're making things more predictable, more crystalline, more repeatable, less risk. You're saying, no, you are pursuing a salt crystal. It's not just a metaphor that we are pursuing silicon. Silicon is a regular crystal with a long-range structure in microstructure. So everything else, the living systems, are more like glasses. What characterizes a glass is that it has no long-range structure. So it's chaotic to answer any level. So but now when you say chaotic, people tend to think like, oh, there's no rule, there's just disorder, it's just mad shit. No, it looks like that way to your alien cortex. But what it is fractal is very rule-based. It's just not predictable.
Yeah, like scale and variance.
That's hard to understand.
Yeah, that's a very deep insight, and I think it.
Yeah, but you can zoom in at any level, and you can prove something wrong. So if you take anything and say this is how the human functions at this level, and give the metrics for that, you can say, yeah, but just zoom in a little bit, and you find it all turns chaotic again, and they're very vulnerable to that.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel that we're going back to Extinctionati number 3 there, and on the edge of chaos and order there. And also I think that we're going back to what you were saying at the beginning, because I'm very happy you brought up the idea of predictability, because that's one of the big things. And why we were talking about this strike that's happening. There's not a strike, but this kind of defection from work in the States and in other parts of the world, I'd say, but we don't maybe know about it, is that it shows the failure of what these globalization partisans want to create as UBI, because this is actually showing that it will fail, and that kind of reasoning,
UBI is super popular in the techno-utopian sphere, and it's very, very dangerous, because you have in the previous economies we had leverage, like if the elites and the system still needed people to participate as soldiers, as consumers, as this kind of thing. But and if we went on a strike, then the factories would stop. But now the factories keep running if you go on a strike. The factories don't even have lights in them sometimes, and
I think
we just don't have leverage. So if we ask Daddy nicely to give us an allowance as we're to replace us, we have no way of preventing them from just cutting that off later. Like we just become dependent, and we can't function otherwise. And that's the ultimate level of control over us.
I think it's worth highlighting that 1,000,000 times. So a UBI is incredibly dangerous, because don't forget that we just started off this discussion about saying how we serve the machine. So if you go back to like Metropolis, is a great movie that understood this, Franz Litz's movie, and that we are serving Moloch, the machine. And so if you say that, okay, we get pensioned off and we get put out to pasture, now the machine is preserving itself. It's not preserving us. So what it means is that on the books, superficially UBI looks like, oh, we just, now we're free to enjoy ourselves. That was what the guys were thinking in Adam Curtis's Machines of Loving Grace. But look at it on the books. It may start off that way, but very soon they think, this is surplus. The machine is looking for efficiency and saying, well, it's very inefficient looking after, 10 to 11 billion drones. Is why the fuck are we doing that? So UBI is the first step on the road to eugenics, because the machine is serving, because it doesn't serve the surplus, in other words, all the unemployed people on UBI, then they look more and more like a liability on the books. And part of the efficiency of the system would be finding ways of eliminating them, and, you know, removing healthcare, basically doing Alison McDowell's world, where you make people do things that are probably counter to their own interests, but you do them because otherwise they withdraw the UBI. And so this is a stark example. Is it the machine doesn't have to be very complex to actually pension people off, and just say, okay, now you can go and play, and we'll give you a UBI. This way of control is found pretty quickly by people all over the place and throughout history. So, for example, I'll give you a good example: is the police in LA. They used to try and, you know, control the homeless population, but as it got bigger and bigger, they found they didn't have the resources to stop all the crime and the all the petty crime and stuff that homeless people were doing out of kind of social desperation. The way they got control of the people by giving them a McDonald's every day. So I think I'm right in saying that part of a policeman's job in LA, an LA cop, first thing they do in the morning is they go and get like 200 Happy Meals or whatever. Then they go around to the homeless people and dispense them. And you say it costs like $200. And what they worked out was that $200 is worth gold to the police department. Because what they do is they give those out to homeless people, and then they give them out, but with an Alison McDowell kind of strings attached. So they know all the homeless people on the thing, on the road, on the street, and they say, well, I told you yesterday to, you know, you weren't supposed to piss in the thing, and you weren't supposed to break windows, and, you know, rumor has it that you were yesterday. So they do a little court case right there on the thing, and they say, no, you've been naughty. I'm not giving you your McDonald's. So they're keeping them essentially on fast food crack and getting control over them. Now, if you on a UBI, essentially you're in that situation, they will give you some the equivalent of fast food crap in terms of education, in terms of entertainment, in terms of nutrition, in terms of entertainment. They'll give you bottom drawer of all of those, and then they will withhold them. Bottom drawer healthcare as well. And then they will withhold them if you're problematic. So then, as Ryan says, your options for diverting the system and changing it are drastically reduced. So I say,
what about
stay inside the system.
What about the formation of a parallel, those people who are getting, who haven't qualified for their hamburger today? Do you think there's any tendency for that to push them towards creating a separate system, a parallel little society?
No, this is also very dangerous. I say over and over again, this one is coming up more and more, and this one is the most dangerous of all. The liberal conceit that says we can have a parallel polis. You see, poor people don't have this delusion. It's a middle class bourgeois delusion. Now that the middle class is being hollowed out and the bourgeois is starting to see the light, then they are stuck in their house slave thing and saying, like, can't we just have a separate room? And say, no, this is on the Titanic. This is one of the things that IB is doing, Insulate Britain, and a lot of these activists, that they're saying, well, it doesn't matter what's happening in the big system. We make sure that our cabin is dry. So we just have to waterproof our cabin on the Titanic, and then we'll be fine. No, doesn't matter what you do, you're still on the fucking Titanic. And so poor people don't have this delusion that you can have a parallel polis, because they know the system doesn't leave you alone. The system leaves middle class people alone because you're the Ned Flanders that they can tax freely and soak for a job. So they don't give you any shit because you're a good slave, right? But if you do a parallel polis, you're a bad slave. You suddenly got a black hat. Now, in Africa and things like that, is you don't get to go off on your own to get some nice bit of arable land and sort of like, that's That's bushwash.
No, I meant it.
It's horseshit.
Yeah,
It's like
I meant
arable land, and just wait. It's just
Yeah.
arable land, water, all these resources. These are becoming extremely valuable. If you think you can, I mean, we've had this conversation a long time, but these things, people think, oh, I'm going to fish and live off seaweed off the rocks. No, go and have a look. You have to have a license to get seaweed now. You have to have a license to get fish. There are no fucking fish left. Don't do this parallel polis. You do not. You have it's dependent on the fact that you're a rich fuck. But you're going to be a poor fuck soon. So don't think you can do a parallel. You cannot. Do not do this. I'm telling you, turn back. All these fucking people in IB, and you cannot. It's Boyle and all these people. They're making the hugest fucking mistake of their lives. You cannot defect from the system. Don't.
And that guy Prometheus that we were talking about a couple of months ago with that global difference group who was on Discord, and those people are trying to fish around to create a parallel currency, parallel work system, parallel society, and they're eating their tail,
The great unplugged. Yeah, you can't unplug. You can't unplug from this machine. It's like It's like getting another cabin on the Titanic. Don't be a fucking idiot, man.
What I had in mind
out of this romancer.
What I had in mind was something a little bit like your couple of little tales that you've told. If you're remaining in the system, but you're kind of exploiting it. Maybe not quite like a black market system, but where you're partly your nickel and dime thing, partly a black market system, partly where you take the hamburger that's on offer from the person who's qualified to take it, but it's diverted down the line. And I'm not talking about a parallel, like what's the word, a cohesive kind of identifiable parallel system. It's just like a feral thing. It's an opportunistic thing. It's kind of wild and chaotic in itself, but it's people just getting what they can. Do you get the idea?
The way to go is an underground system. So in other words, you want to be in the system but not of it. So that's the key to. So what they discovered is, like talking in terms of system dynamics like we do in Kantian holes, and Ryan's observation that this is like cancer, that's a good way to see it. This cancer is a rogue thing that is going against the Kantian hole and in essence making a new Kantian hole. Well, they made a very interesting discovery recently. And they think, well, it can't just be one way that, the human body as a system is subject to corruption like cancer. It's like, surely cancer is a new system in itself, self-sustaining, dynamic. So is it like, surely that has problematic for itself? And then they indeed found one recently. They found, brace yourselves, that cancer can get cancer. So cancer can get its own cancer. So cancer is not like, we think of healthy cancer, and you say, no, it's systemic. So, the human is like the cancer of the planet. We think, no, it's a healthy human. Well, the healthier the human is, the worse it is for the planet. So, if somebody on their freaking deathbed has a lot lower carbon footprint than somebody that's like mega healthy. So we are the cancer of the thing. So, but we consider that healthy person. Now, you think healthy person gets cancer. So, no, it's just a new Kantian hole. And then that Kantian hole also can be subject to its cancer. And so then there's a long-winded way of saying, instead of a parallel polis, you want to become the cancer's cancer. So you want to stay in the system and become the system's cancer. So you want to spread like cancer. You want to be self-reinforcing. You want to take over the blood supply. You want to redirect the blood supply of the cancer. Now, you can say like, well, you don't want to get to a point where you're self-sustaining and you become a parasite on the cancer. you want to kill the cancer off. You want to kill off your host. So you want to put as much burden on the cancer, and by that I mean, you know, Western industrial civilization.
Yeah.
You want to put as
Ryan,
much burden on that cancer planet till you kill your host, and that's the aim.
May I ask a question to Ryan about this?
Sure.
How would this being the cancer to the cancer apply to AI in form of, I'm thinking underground activism. I'm thinking, you know, how do you see it as an expert?
I think one of the best ideas I've heard so far is Hugh's idea of doing what the boss says and taking it to the extreme. I think that's a very effective way. And so you're drawing the lifeblood from that. So you're earning you know, house slave money, and then you can redirect the house slave money to, you know, fund some secret book publishing and stuff like that. So you the key thing is to get operational security right, so that you can preserve some level of pseudonymy. Because if any of your activities start smelling like you're parallel posting or something like that, then you become a target, and then you become surveilled, and then you become quashed. And anybody who connects to you, they'll take your laptop, they take everything. You know, in Australia, they've even made encryption illegal. Like it's insane, the level of violence they will apply. So if you wanted to be a cancer on the system, you can lean hard into the bureaucratic tangle and just like make it more brambly, make it more like red tape, essentially make organizations function less well. And you can make but you need to be very careful, because the externalities of such bureaucracy can be accelerating destruction if you're not careful. So you need to be aware that the kind of bureaucracy you create is in the time dimension for human beings, and it's not in the resource dimension for nature, because then you're doing more damage. But you have to make people struggle with time. So most of the economy, most of the digital economy is about removing humans from the equation. It's about, you know, for example, Facebook has something like 20,000 employees, 200,000 employees or something, and manages the daily lives of, you know, 2+ billion people. It's if you replace all of the systems with these kinds of unicorns, and this is what the venture capitalists want. All of them want this kind of leverage against human beings, where you have, you know, a very, very skewed, a few jobs controlling everybody. That's very good for the economics of the investors, but very bad for the system. Back a few centuries, almost everybody was you know, subsistence agriculturalist, and that was less dangerous in terms of leverage. But it's a so I think that's did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. It did. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'd just like to add to that. So just that, yeah, very well said, Ryan. But the very first step is to evade the system's immune system. So you have to evade the immune system first. So part of the thing that these activists are doing is wrong, is they become antagonists. So the system moves, you know, the systemic immune system moves against them quickly. So you don't want to completely be benign. So you don't want to completely evade the immune system to the extent that you aren't being a pathogen anymore. If you're completely compliant, then you're not a pathogen anymore. But if you evade the immune system to the costs of the system, then it's you're getting ahead. So in other words, think in terms of, say, the pandemic now. You have to make cost-benefit analysis all the way down the line. So you have to think in terms of vax passports. You don't want to make a militant stand where you're just absolutist about vaccines. You want to say, like, at some point you say, fuck it, fuck the risk, I'll get it. But you might want to make the system work. So the system worked so hard to get you to take the vax that then you would, the benefits to the system of you having the vax are completely nullified. The cost benefit equation for them is upside down. And so, yeah, a lot of the things, like Ryan was saying, is you can extend and offer suggestions. This is, go and have a look at Soviet records. So wrecking was the biggest bane of the life for Soviets, is low grade wrecking. And one of the things wreckers and insurgents, if you have a look at the insurgents manual that they gave for people in occupied France, they said, you must tell the system a good thing. One of them is safety. So a very good way of wrecking things is safety. Is you act like the good guy, and you do your Ned Flanders, and you go and you say, like, well, yes, but there's a problem here. Look, the system, we can do this like this, but think of the safety. I think we should make sure that blah happens. Then people will be safer. And that blah fucks the whole thing up. But you just said it makes it safer. So you carry on offering helpful suggestions to, in essence, further the goals and look like a goody two-shoes, where you're undermining the system because you're burdening it with all these unnecessary safety measures and things, and controls. It's like, we want everybody to be scrupulously honest. So therefore, we want to put this in place to make sure that nobody can break the rules. Perfect. Except damn well that you just made the whole system intolerable. You've just increased the radicalism. You just increased people's disaffection. But you're a good guy. You just made some great suggestions. So make great suggestions. And the more great suggestions you make, the more counterproductive it is for the system. So that's the way to go. But
yeah,
I think that we better stop there unless anybody's got anything to say at this stage.
Yeah,
we should do part 2.
Yeah, we should do a part 2.
We're completely.
I think this AI course is profitable way of looking at things. I think it's surfaced a whole load of good stuff. I think it's really good subject. I hope people agree.
I'd like to, if we do some more on it next time, to go back to the reading and writing a little bit more directly.
I actually wanted to close out referencing that, Gary, with a final thought, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
I think that I don't know how many of you have read Ishmael, but it makes a distinction between the leavers and the takers, which is essentially the hunter-gatherers and the industrialized, religious-y people. Although it makes a weird distinction saying that the religious people were the leavers, which I'm not sure I agree with. But the idea there was that if you are hoarding, if you are so afraid of death that you need to control it by getting more food than you need, taking more food than you need, and that's essentially what writing is it that you are you're preserving the things for beyond the now. It's for the future, that you can kind of save the energy of cognition for the future, so you don't have to think of it again, and you can just pass that down, and it's surplus, it's excess, to the point where it runs away from itself. So much like agriculture, and agriculture kind of leads you to this system of writing and things like that, so you can tax it and such. But the idea essentially is that's what breaks us out of that fractal harmony of scale and variance of diversity, is when one element, one layer of that that ecosystem starts extracting beyond its natural flow, then it turns into a cancer. Then it creates a discontinuity with the the flow of energy through the ecosystem, because it starts accumulating and buffering up for the future, and that compounds. That's like compounding interest. So that's why it's exponential. That's why cancer is exponential as well.
Yeah, well, I was thinking it's very interesting that you've said that, because I was just thinking, bringing that back just to consider the conversation that we've just had, which sort of flows along and develops of its own accord and all the rest of it. But you're aware that every now and then along the way, there's a potential fork in the road where you might like to ask a question or expand a particular point. You can just let it roll on, or take notes and say, hey, I want to go back to that part and ask a question. So you write down something that I've written here to remind me to go back and ask about, for instance, just the difference between what was going on with cave art, where people were recording or doing something there, and the difference between what's going on there and what's going on where people are writing. But this is the thing, I suppose, do you just pursue the stream of consciousness and forget about revisiting turn-off points because they might be interesting, or use writing or some external storage, as a little signpost to go back and visit something worthwhile? Is in a way taking a note the equivalent of a hunter-gatherer remembering a particular place where a tree grows that has apples on it or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, wait. Can I interject just at that point?
Sure.
So maybe we should keep this for next time, but I'll answer as quickly as I can. So that what you're doing is, like Ryan says, is you alienating yourself from the system. So by doing this kind of analysis, you're alienating yourself from the here and now. So it's not this like a hunter-gatherer remembering where they're apples. In fact, if a hunter-gatherer remembers when they're apples, it's kind of a false demand, because it's out of time and place. So, for example, imagine how damaging it would be for the ecosystem for a hunter-gatherer to make a shopping list. So the hunter-gatherer wouldn't just go and say like, oh, I'm feeling an iron deficit, so therefore I'm going to, eat this that has an iron. Gets a vitamin C deficit. We're evolved to go after sources of vitamin C unconsciously when we have a vitamin C deficit. We evolved to go and lie in the sun when we have a vitamin D. Now what you're doing is fucking that system up, because you have the hunter-gatherer essentially has, I must go and get some apples, I must go and get some sunshine, and then it's like, they make that list on Thursday, then they go and do it on Saturday. Well, the whole situation's changed, but they're completely alienated. They're out of time and place. So a hunter-gatherer, it's absolutely fatal for them to have a shopping list for the shit that they want to extract from nature.
But I mean,
in essence, that's what the system is doing.
Then what is our position when we're having a discussion like this?
Yeah,
because
I'd like to.
We're kind of violating what we're talking about while we're having the discussion.
Right. So this is similar to the anarchists needing to form a hierarchy in order to beat the other hierarchy.
Yeah. Well.
So this is we need to use the internet in order to play on an equal playing field with the system. We need to if you opt out of the cancerous qualities, you don't become a cancer on the cancer. You become, something in the path of the cancer that's just going to be destroyed. So you have to leverage the cancerous elements and take the power that you have, even though you knowingly know that it's it is the root problem. So if you opt out and you say, oh, I'm not going to use money, then you're not going to catch up, right? If you or I'm going to not use the internet, or I'm not going to use, I mean, you need to think about ways around the system, but leverage the tools that are available, and don't play into the system's hands. If you start saying this is what democracy looks like, you're doing it wrong. Okay, like don't play into the system's hands, but don't also hobble yourself against the system by go against the core tenets of anarchism in order to make anarchism more viable, basically.
Yeah, so I would add to that, in case that's the external view of your question, Gary, and you were thinking more of the internal subjective view and the kind of more spiritual view, then what's the first stage is necessary, is in essence the 10 bull sequence. So the very first step is to see the bull, and I highlight the bull as the alien cortex, but AI is an extension of the bull. So if you go through the 10 bull sequence, when you eventually transcending the bull, you realize that there was nothing to transcend. So again, we're in this thing I keep on raising, is you cannot attack people's or heal people's irrationality or insanity by telling them, to just not be so fucking insane. Don't be scared of death. And so if you pull yourself out of it, you have to say, go with their pathology. Like I said with my granddad about, the only way to cure him is to accept this delusion that he has an eel, and then you can remove the eel. But you can't just say, get over it, you haven't got an eel inside you. So you can't say that to you. It's like, while you think that there is a problem, there is. So you kind of have to go with that, and then eventually people will realize, hey, there's no problem. Say, yeah, but it's weird and contradictory, but that's the essence of it. Is you have to accept that there is some problem to get over, and then it's for people to realize, but there was never any bull. So, yeah, but there was and there wasn't. So in other words, there is no bull, there is no alien cortex, but you have to say there is, play this game, so people can get over it and realize that there is no alien cortex. Probably a good way to go over it. But you see, just the fact that you're trying to get around the system, beat the system, is the alien cortex itself is trying to escape the system as death. So it's personifying the system as death, and it's trying to outsmart the system. So, well, there's the problem right there, because that's the system talking. Where's that system? Here. But anyway, in the next one, I'd like to pursue exactly what our intelligence is, because, Brian raised a very good point, and there's AI would be well trying to emulate a hunter-gatherer. And so it's worthwhile, I think, pursuing that a bit deeper and say, if you accept what I say, that with AI, we're trying to mimic human intelligence. That was its genesis anyway, whatever it's become. But it's basically we're trying to do power projection, and we're trying to use AI as a tool to further the alien cortex's own goals. So, it's very interesting that the native intelligence, that all of this, the genesis of this thing was a hunter-gatherer's intelligence, our intelligence. So it's very instructive, I think, and why we should go deeper is to say, why is AI inadequate to the very thing that we wanted it to augment or extend?
Sounds interesting. I think that's a good stopping point.
And may I suggest also, if we talk about writing and reading the next time too, in like we said, that we could explore also the other side of reading and writing, which is storytelling, and which is the, you know, the transition from an oral tradition of transmission of stories, whether they're hunting stories or legends, to the writing of these things, because I'd be very interested in exploring that personally.
Yeah, I think there's a
okay. Well, can I? So you better go quick, Gary, and then we better have a pause and
no.
start.
I'm just going to say, yeah, I think that there's a lot of other things that we haven't even begun talking about. You know, we really need to keep going on it. I won't raise a new question at this stage.
We've got right until doomsday, and so we can talk until the icy water goes over our heads. Just remember that we're on the Titanic, and that so just reminding ourselves that we are on the Titanic.
I just wanted to, I guess the closing point, I just want to recall something that you said a while ago regarding the technology that we're using. And I thought it was quite good. I think you said something to the effect that what we're doing here now, just talking like this using the technology, is probably the highest use of it. It's the best use that could be made of it. You know, so that's.
I agree, and the end result is it undermines it. So we are using the internet, like Ryan is saying, to undermine it, but undermine the thinking behind it. Yeah. Well, let's just pause and remind ourselves why we're actually doing this. So the reason for actually pausing like this is because we're creating, like Sophie says, new stories in our head, and a new story to replace the old story is important. But the more important thing is to recognize the storyteller and to go beyond storytelling to kind of like Greg's realization of just being. And the only way to actually do that is to stop thinking and talking and to just be. So let's just do that. In that release and peace that passeth all understanding, we say Om Param Atmane Namah. Great.
Well, thanks for that, Hugh. Thanks, thanks, Ryan, too. You said some very good things. It was really interesting.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Greg, for your contribution.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, it was
nice
an
discussion.
So